Right. It's the 3rd of August, 1896. William Tudor's Cambridge Circus is about to open. The audience sits in hushed anticipation. That's you lot. The gaslights flicker. The conductor raises his baton. The red velvet curtains are swept aside. The band launches into a circus march. And parading into the arena come the ringmaster, the horses with their bareback riders, the jugglers, acrobats, clowns, trapeze artists, all in their bright costumes. And the circus begins. Welcome to Tudor's Circus. Thank you for asking us to tell you a bit about it. People have come here tonight from as far as Chesterton, West Chesterton, Newton, even Toft, so I'm told, because they're all friends of mine, so I know where they're from. We're going to tell you about the building, and we're going to tell you tales of a few of the artists, but there's a lot more information on our website. So, on the 1st of August, 1896, an advertisement in Cambridge Daily News announced the imminent opening in Auckland Road of Tudor's new circus, with a talented company of singers, performers, funniosities by the best of clowns, and a splendid stud of horses and ponies. The proprietor was William Tudor, and that's him in the middle. This was a permanent brick building, a successor to the temporary wooden circuses on Midsummer Common that Tudor had run in 1888 and 1893 and 1895. And you're already asking, where was it? The 1896 building was in Barnwell, the suburb dreaded by the university that harboured the young women who were walking the Cambridge streets intent on corrupting undergraduates, as we've learned in the past year from Caroline Biggs and her story of the spinning house. And that also puts it close to the female refuge that this society heard about last month from Susan Woodall. And it was over on the right at number 3, at the bottom of Auckland Road, next to Midsummer Common. The temporary circus that Tudor co-managed with well-known clown Charlie Keith in 1888 was here at number 1 on Butt Green. And we've got good evidence that Tudor's own temporary circuses of 1893 and 1895 were at position 2 by the corner of Jesus Close. Now, although this talk is about the brick building, the brick-built 1896 building in Auckland Road, Tudor's solo Cambridge career began on the Common in 1893, and some of the events we'll describe happened in the early years. This is what the temporary 1893 and 95 buildings looked like. It's actually Charlie Keith's return to Butt Green without William Tudor in 1890. But we're confident that Tudor copied the wooden design and then used it for the brick building in 1896. Susan Woodall showed this picture in her talk about the female refuge last month. It shows the Auckland Road district as an area of fun. That's the circus next to the Common. The Star Brewery. There were many public houses in and around Newmarket Road in the 1880s and 90s. And it was also an area of Victorian, I have my occasional stutter, Victorian morality and temperance. The female refuge behind Christchurch and the Barnwell Mission in the former theatre, which is now the Buddhist Centre. And here's the 1896 circus in the 1980s. The Auckland Road side is on the left, in its last guise as the home of Midsummer glassmakers. As I've said, it was a permanent brick-built shed with a corrugated iron roof. On the right, there's the view from the approach across the Common from Cutter Ferry, if you'd come to the circus from Chesterton, as our friends here would do, clearly. And here we're looking back to the ferry from the bottom of Auckland Road with Auckland Court, which was on the right, which was built on the circus site in 1993. So what was it like inside? Well, that's what it was like inside. One of the pleasures of digging in the county archives in Ely is that you find wonderful things. here are the original plans. According to the Cambridge Daily News, it was the same size as the previous year's wooden building, so it was 90 feet by 60 feet. There was a 40-foot diameter ring. The capacity was 1,400. It was built by Francis Faudet, well-known local builder, a family name commemorated just behind us here in the next street. And Tudor had a 10-year lease from landowner Thomas Askham. And this is one of the few illustrations we have of the interior. It's actually in the post after Tudor left Cambridge, but it shows us the inside. You have a glimpse of students in their gowns in the pit and in the gallery. And now here's just a quick summary of the buildings. So wooden buildings, 1888 to 95 on and off, and then Auckland Road under Tudor from 1896 to 99, and then under the Askham family's regime after that. What of the man himself? Here's William Tudor and a summary of his career. He lived a long life, unlike members of his family. He grew up around horses because his father was a blacksmith. They were a family of circus performers as well. And he had a long career working for other circus managers before becoming a successful circus owner himself. He had a long association with North East England, especially Blythe in Northumberland, but he was well known here in Cambridge and not so far away in Ipswich. He ended his working life in Blythe with his third wife as a cinema and dance hall owner. He was a popular and genial man. And we know that because this illustrated tribute is from the citizens of Blythe in 1894. And amongst other praise, they said, "We can testify to the moral good you have accomplished." And the previous year, there was a similar presentation, although we've not found that document, similar presentation at the end of the Cambridge season. He was hailed as always the same good old Tudor by brewer Albert Scales at the end of that season. Now, finally, for the time being, before we tell you what actually happened in the circus, here's the entertainment world's 1896 social medium. It's the Entertainer's newspaper, The Era. It was a gig economy. Artists would announce their availability when seeking engagement. Tudor would engage a stock company of equestrians and clowns for the season, but the other acts would change from week to week. So here he is, advertising his need for acts new to Cambridge. And people were asked to contact him at Causeway House, which is by the Four Lamps Junction down at the smart end of Barnwell. He lodged there, handily placed for the Common and Auckland Road during several of his Cambridge seasons. Right, we're going to change over without the benefit of a safety net, so let's just make sure we get that right.
So our circus was outside the Mill Road area, but not so far that the residents of Mill Road didn't visit it. And we've included a little bit of local information about the audience that you won't find on our website. And so to get some idea of who went to the circus, let us look at one night when the circus was still in the temporary building on Midsummer Common. So Mr. Jones, one Friday towards the end of September 1893, Mr. Frederick Jones of 15 Cockburn Street left his family home and made his way down Mill Road on his way to Tudor's Circus. Aged 46, Mr. Jones and his wife Sabina had 8 sons and 1 daughter. And here is the family in the 1891 census. And we like to think of the paterfamilias escaping from his large and perhaps noisy family and going for an evening out with friends. Mr. Jones was a tripe dresser, and he may have worked for Edwards, the tripe shop in Fitzroy Street. We don't have a picture of the shop, so here is just a contemporary photo of Fitzroy Street. So on his way to the circus, he may have gone down East Road, and he could have passed a Mr. Hobbs from 178 East Road, or Miss Maud Irwin from the Baker's Arms at 176. The circus was closing for the season the following week, and Mr. Tudor always held competitions for the audience. The Cambridge Express tells us that the audience was a bumper one that night. They enjoyed the excitement of the brothers Olmar on the horizontal bar, the Silvani troupe of 6 trick cyclists, 3 of them ladies, remarkably clever, Miss Violet and Miss Kitty on the tightrope, and Charles Clifford from Ireland on the harp. But the audience were particularly amazed by the contortions of Ludwig Linus from Germany. And sadly, we have never been able to find a picture of him, but he went by the names of the human crocodile and the man snake. But then there was audience participation with a handicap race around the ring, the 3 winners each getting a silver prize. And Mr. Catchpole of Sydney Street correctly guessed the number in the audience. And a missing word competition awarded 1 and 9p each to 6 winners, including our Mr. Frederick Jones, as well as Mr. Hobbs and Maud Irwin. And it would be nice to imagine them all popping into the Baker's Arms on their way home to spend their 1 and 9p. And Frederick Jones is still not too far away, for he's buried in Mill Road Cemetery along with his wife, Sabina. So week after week, the circus acts would change, and a variety of performers from all over the country and even the world would turn up at Cambridge and then move on. And we're going to tell you about just a few of the many who feature on our website. We're going to start with the equestrians. William Tudor began his circus life as an equestrian, and we could not talk about him without talking about horses because they were such a prominent part of his circus. The round circus arena, so familiar to us today, started when the ex-dragoon Philip Astley opened his hippodromes in the 1760s, where he displayed his military riding skills, but he soon added circus acts to enliven the entertainment. And the circus arena is always between 40 and 47 feet, which is the best dimension for a circling horse and rider. So Tudor himself was a fine rider, and we think that this is him standing on horseback in the Transfields poster, bottom left. The press said about him, "The dumb animals under his command are his constant study and care, and the perfection at which they have arrived are the most convincing testimony to his love and care for them." The horses would have been stabled at the back of the Auckland Road building underneath the gallery, and we know that Tudor was particularly concerned for their welfare because there was a court case in Cambridge where he sacked a stable hand for not feeding his horses good enough hay. And as well as Tudor himself, there would be a stock company of riders, both male and female, who stayed for the whole season doing their bareback riding tricks and putting their hands to any of the other circus tasks that were needed. The women bareback riders were often as daring as the men, as you can see from the young lady, bottom right, who is wearing the equestrian's outfit of a short skirt and tights as she leaps on and off her galloping horse. Now we think this is young Becky Daniels. She rode in Tudor's circuses from the age of 14 upwards. And we think it's her because this picture was taken from Tudor's circus in Blythe in 1894 when she was working with him. She was soon a Cambridge favourite with her dashing bareback tricks, and the audience had their heart in their mouths one evening when, while her horse jumped, she caught her foot and fell, spraining her ankle, but after a short rest, she again made an attempt and finished her turn amidst much applause. She was later to star in American circuses, where she was described as the celebrated English beauty who, by her equestrian skill, has won the foremost place in the ranks of the women riders of the world. And on the right here is Fred Derrick, whose spectacular horsemanship delighted the Cambridge audiences from 1897 to 1899. He was famous for his running jump over his galloping horse and for juggling while riding, standing on horseback going round the ring. And he was not above balancing on the rolling globe, impersonating a wild man or a chieftain, and joining in the clown's humorous acts. And he also went on to America, where he toured with Barnum and Bailey, became one of their most famous circus riders, and this is him with his fellow American performer, Ella Bradner, who has the whip hand, as you can see. And then there was Mademoiselle Caroline, who acted out the entire life of Joan of Arc with 4 costume changes, all done non-stop on horseback. Or the galloping cousins from the Cook Circus family, Cyril and Clarence could leap over 4 cantering horses at once. And a very famous circus owner and rider who came to Cambridge in 1896 was James Newson, aged 72, but still performing, but just with Shetland ponies at this time. And his daughter Coralie accompanied him with her haute école thoroughbred horse. It's on the right. So haute école is like today's dressage, so she wore a proper riding habit, no short skirts and tights for her. But the most popular horsey event was the hippodrama, which is a strange hybrid of drama and horse riding, where the horses have the major parts. Hippodramas became so popular at this time that even the actor-manager, Edmund Kean, had to include horses in his production of Shakespeare's Richard III at Drury Lane. And one version of Macbeth had Lady Macbeth doing the sleepwalking scene on a Shetland pony. So the story of Dick Turpin's ride to York on Bonnie Black Bess, complete with her leap over the 5-bar toll gate and her death at the gates of York, would play at the end of every season in Cambridge, with the whole company joining in and William Tudor in the leading role. The Cambridge Daily News reported, to witness this ever-popular display, there was a bumping house. Mr. Tudor's Dick Turpin is well acted, and better still is the wonderful docility and intelligence of Black Bess. The best scene is the death of Black Bess, which should be witnessed by all who wish to see the perfection of horse training. So when Tudor left Cambridge in 1899 and the circus was taken over by the landowner, Thomas Askham, the horses were replaced. From then on, it would be mostly comedians and singers and dancers, particularly if they were young women in short, flouncy skirts. The music hall was replacing the circus, and Bonnie Black Bess would gallop no more.
Thank you. So back to July 1895, when Tudor Circus returned to Midsummer Common with a fine flurry of acrobats, high-wire artists, horses and clowns. The season was off to a flying start with Alar the Human Arrow, more of her soon, and Salmon the Demon Cyclist. Bicycles, of course, were as popular in Cambridge then as now, and Frederick Jones, walking from Cockburn Street and Mill Road to the circus, would have been overtaken by bicycles, tandems, tricycles, and possibly a sociable tricycle like this one. In the previous 2 months, 2 cyclists frightened a horse in Mill Road and it bolted and threw its rider. Several young men fell off their bicycles and were treated at Addenbrooke's. A Corpus Christi undergrad was fined 2 shillings and 7 pence for riding without lights, while a more law-abiding cyclist had their lamp stolen. The matter of furious riding of bicycles was raised with the police. Not much has changed. So the performance by William Salmon, the demon cyclist, was particularly appreciated. Having removed the handlebar, he rode on the front wheel and the back, and then on stilts, and then played a violin, and all on the bicycle. He was so skillful that our reviewer in the local press said that Cambridge's cyclists could learn a lot from him. You'll agree, it certainly beats riding no hands while typing on a smartphone, doesn't it? This isn't actually him. It's the nearest picture we could find. But even more of a star turn were the Flying Zedoras with Alar the Human Arrow. They were a startling and sensational trapeze act, The Cambridge Daily News wrote, "One little slip or a fraction of a second late in the flying acts, and they are precipitated into the net below." This happened twice last night, but only in attempting one of the most difficult feats that has been witnessed in Cambridge, flying from one end of the building past the centre, turning a double somersault and catching hold of a bar upon which is a lady swinging to the other end of the building and back again in time to fly onto his own bar. One of the male Zedorahs performed blindfolded and with a sack over his head, but it was the young girl, Alar the Human Arrow, who really impressed. And the report continued, "A great act was expected from Alar, and the audience was not disappointed. Their excitement when the word was given to go, apparently being at its zenith. A bow is fixed over the gallery. Alar is the arrow and is shot through the target and caught by a young lady on the other side. The fresh and unparalleled feat was greeted with a regular roof raiser." Thank you. During the 1890s, the Zedorahs toured Britain, Europe and the USA, appearing for 4 seasons with Barnum and Bailey, as the poster shows. Alar was Pansy Murphy, seen here probably in 1897. Although the members of the Zedorahs varied, Tony Zedorah, Adele, that's Adelaide Murphy, and her younger sister Pansy, that's Frances Murphy, known as Alar, get my head around all those names, were the members when they performed in Tudor Circus on Midsummer Common in 1895 and then in Auckland Road in 1899. Adele was born in Liverpool and ran away to join the circus, and when their parents died, her younger sister joined her. The human arrow trick which Pansy performed was unique, dramatic and dangerous. She suffered at least one accident at Madison Square Garden in New York, as shown in this newspaper report, where she's lying stunned on her launch platform when the bow malfunctioned. You can see the bow on the platform and the distant target. Despite this, she continued to perform as the human arrow until a personal tragedy when Sister Adele died in 1902. She was only 32. Pansy carried on in other acts, was never shot from a bow again, but she continued performing and did this act where she hung by her mouth from a trapeze. Right, now, and this is where the story started, because without Robert Poole, there would be no Tudor Circus website or talk here tonight. William Tudor ended his career as a cinema owner in Blyth in the 1920s, but he'd spotted the potential of cinema in October 1896 when Robert W. Poole's films were shown at Auckland Road. These films might be forgotten but for the work of film historian Ian Christie. Poole was also an important maker of scientific instruments, and his work is documented at our Museum of Technology and at the Whipple Museum. And here is a silk programme from that week in October 1896, possibly given to the Mayor of Cambridge, who attended that night. There can't have been many silk programmes produced, and he was a guest of honour. And Poole's films, exhibited by Mr. Shrapnel, are at number 9 on the bill. And here are 2 films that were almost certainly shown that week. A Soldier's Courtship, so you see a little bit of comedy drama, and a bit of documentary, The Prince of Wales's Horse Winning the Derby. And from then on, other forms of cinema would appear regularly at Tudor Circus, showing news such as Gladstone's funeral and the Greek-Ottoman War. We're pretty certain this was the first showing of moving pictures in Cambridge. Maybe Mr. Jones of Cockburn Street would have thrown his hat in the air with patriotic fervour when film of Queen Victoria's Jubilee procession was shown in July 1897.
So one act that Mr. Jones may well have seen on the 21st of August 1893 was when circus audiences were promised a novel turn, Oscar Dubourg the Man Fish and Lolla the Mermaid. This unusual aquatic entertainment took place in a glass tank full of water, with Oscar and Lolla astounding people by their underwater tricks. And here he is in his rather fine fish-scale spangled swimsuit. We first hear of Monsieur Oscar Dubourg, real name Charles Johnson, in 1872, and he performed with great success for well over 20 years. He toured on the continent for the next 10 years, travelling as far as St. Petersburg and Siberia. From 1887, he performed with Little Jim the Boy Frog. We tried to find an image of his crystal tank, but we only came across this wonderfully fanciful circus poster showing Oscar in his tank complete with steamship, fish, sailing ship. But his act went wrong in December 1886 in Sheffield. Dubourg had been motionless at the bottom of his tank for 3 minutes, as usual. He began to rise, and then he sank again to the bottom and remained motionless for 2 more minutes. The audience began to get alarmed, and suddenly a young man, Albert Colley, leapt from his front row seat, plunged into the tank, pulled Oscar out. Vigorous efforts were meant to revive him, and after 2 minutes, he managed to open his eyes and to assure the audience he was all right and thank Albert for his preservation. And all this was reported in the Era, the trade magazine. But Oscar, fearing that his report would harm his professional reputation, wrote to the Era, denying that he needed rescue, as he was merely imitating a drowning man, which I did most successfully, so much so that the spectators became alarmed at my long immersion, and one youth plunged into the tank just as I was in the act of rising. That's the plain fact of the case. From 1889, Lolla replaced Little Jim. Lolla the Mermaid, the Russian wonder, and I always hoped they might have met in St. Petersburg or Siberia. The Cambridge Daily News enthusiastically reported their act. The various clever performances of these two are alone worthy of a visit to the circus. Lolla succeeds in picking up eggs and 115 coins from the bottom of the tank while peeling an apple and staying underwater for over 2 minutes. Dubourg cleverly dives through and under an iron chair, drinks, eats, and plays cards with Lolla while underwater. The programme is of such a varied and interesting character as to satiate the appetite of even the most fastidious habitués of this highly popular circus. So we see a final glimpse of Oscar in 1895 as he and the Niagara sisters, and I hope Lolla is one of them, advertised they had just completed a successful European tour culminating in the Royal Palace, Constantinople, by command of the Sultan of Turkey. And that is the last we hear of the fishy pair. In the meantime, a host of less spectacular but equally entertaining acts filled the ring, with handbell ringers, big boot dancers, hand shadow puppets, Tyrolean yodeling, whistling, clog dancing, and Monsieur Louis Dupre's educated dogs, educated, not trained, who could read, write, tell the time of day, and play cards, but not underwater.
A most unusual performer engaged by Tudor in Cambridge in August 1893 was Josephine Matthews, known as Evetta the Lady Clown, claimed to be the first and only female clown. We've included her because of her novelty, her strong character, and the fact that there are many images of her, including this lovely poster from when she toured with Barnum and Bailey in America in 1895 and 1896. In an interview, she said, "My father and mother were in the circus business all their lives, and a few weeks after each of the 21 children were born, it was wheeled across the tightrope in a wheelbarrow by my mother. That was our first appearance. Is it any wonder that we went into the circus or on the stage?" Here are about half of that family of tiny female acrobats from the 1881 census. The range of different birthplaces reflects the peripatetic lifestyle of the circus performer. She said, "When I was 6 years old, I entered the ring and I haven't been out of it for 20 years, except occasionally to go on the stage. The first night I went into the ring, I had no idea what I was going to say, but I made a big hit. It wasn't so much what I said, but the way I said it that caught the crowd. A woman clown was a novelty. It was not my cleverness, but my idea and the confidence I had that carried me through. I believe that a woman can do anything for a living that a man can do, and do it just as well as a man. All my people laughed at me when I told them I was going to enter the ring as a clown, but they don't laugh now when they see that I can keep in an engagement all the time and earn as much or more money than they can." After success in America, we find her in Paris, where the artistic photographer Émile Puyo took a series of photographs of her. She's in a studio in comparatively scanty clothing, voluminous pantaloons and a vest-style top, with clown's hat and a doll or a puppet figure dressed in a clown costume. And there are a couple of photos of her wearing even less. Maybe she needed the money she would have earned from that. Cambridge saw her when she was 25 and still called Josephine, advertised as the lady clown and wire walker. The Cambridge Express says she greatly pleased with her tumbling and lovely sallies. You can read more about this unusual woman on our website under the individual performers section, but she features on lots of other websites and in several academic works on women in circuses. Some of the illustrations on our website are taken from the Cambridge Graphic, a short-lived illustrated paper that ran from 1900 to 1901, a couple of years after Tudor had left Cambridge. Talbot Ellison went every week to record some of the circus acts, as well as sports matches, fetes, and fun events. It's interesting to realise that with news photography in its infancy, records of events would be hand-drawn. I particularly like these lively illustrations of the University versus Yorkshire at Fenners, another Mill Road connection, of course. And you'll be pleased to know, as I was, that the match ended an hour early on the last day when the sides shook hands on a draw, so the men of Yorkshire could hurry round the corner for an early train home. The picture on the left is of a couple sitting on a big Chivers jam jar at Histon Feast, and on the right is a family going off on a seaside excursion. The Cambridge Graphic is well worth a look, isn't it, Mary? Mary Burgess loves nothing more at 9:30 on a morning to go to her store and get out these two massive volumes for us. They're worth just browsing. Anyway, back to the circus. And this is what Mary's come for. Frederick Tudor Hall, the clown Funny Fred Hall, was William Tudor's younger brother, born in Lambeth on the 1st of August 1857. He wasn't far behind William in his career, and before he was 19 in 1876, he was on the road clowning for Stoodley and Harmston's circus, alongside William. Both were regulars with that circus until 1879, and Fred quickly became an audience favourite, constantly on the move, like so many of our performers, going where the work was, drawing the crowds, gaining good reviews wherever he went. He married Julia Butler in 1881. Here's an 1888 review from Scarborough, which Fred himself posted in the Era to blurb himself up. Give you a few seconds just to read that. And he was obviously versatile, as he played a part in Turpin's Ride for Hengler's Circus in 1887, and the following year a press report said, "When Funny Fred Hall is in the ring, the whole establishment is in an uproar of merriment." In the 1890s, while still accepting gigs for other managers, Fred often worked for William, and on one occasion managed Tudor's circus in Blythe when William was absent. probably running another circus somewhere else in the north. He doesn't seem to have come to Cambridge before 1897, when he came to Auckland Road. And there he is on the bill. The Daily News, Cambridge Daily News, tells us that Fred Hall is gifted with an extraordinary expression of countenance and with droll remarks keeps the house in a continuous state of uproar. He was clearly a big hit because in 1898, the Cambridge Express tells us, Funny Fred's return to Cambridge was greeted with a loud cheer. His abilities as a clown are told not only in Cambridge, but also in a far wider circle. And then disaster. He went to London after the show on Saturday, 20th of August, 1898. He caught a chill. He was performing the following Tuesday, but he developed pneumonia. On Sunday the 28th, he died in his lodging in Willow Walk, with Julia at his bedside. He was only 41. He was an immense favourite of the Cambridge audiences, and the Newmarket Daily News reported, his many witty mannerisms, so essentially his own, will long be remembered, and his decease will be regretted by both young and old patrons of the circus. The remains of Frederick Tudor Hall were interred at Mill Road Cemetery on Wednesday, the sad ceremony drawing a large and sympathetic gathering. The cortege left 13 Willow Walk and proceeded via Fitzroy Street, Warkworth Street, Parkside and Mill Road, the hearse followed by 4 coaches. I think we should reenact that. His grave is in the Holy Trinity sector of the cemetery, in the southeast corner, just by the path. The inscription reads, Fond memory, beloved husband of Julia Hall. There's no mention of his career, except out, out, brief candle. That's the speech from Macbeth that proclaims life to be a poor player that struts and frets his way upon the stage. Well, I don't think that's really Fred. But if Julia Hall can quote Shakespeare, then we can too. Alas, poor Fred. He was a fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy, as Hamlet so very nearly said.
So from all the accounts we've read, everybody thought Tudor was a genial and popular man, and he made lots of friends in Cambridge. But I'm not sure that the same can be said of his successor, the self-made businessman and owner of the circus, Thomas Askham. The son of a labourer, he became a coach builder and a property owner, among other business ventures, and he ended his days as the equivalent of a millionaire. But when he took over Tudor's circus in 1900, his lack of experience showed. Within a month or two, he was embroiled in a court case with Arthur Folger. Askham underestimated the importance of the circus band and appointed Folger, a publican and an amateur cornet player with a string band, to run it. The Cambridge Daily News reported unfavourably at the first performances, saying, "The music was scarcely so successful as could be wished. Indeed, there seemed to be much misunderstanding between the various instruments at times." The band was so bad that Askham sacked them and appointed a London band instead. Folger took him to court for the non-payment of £17 for the hire of the band for 3 weeks. And despite the testimony of witnesses and performers who supported Askham, Askham lost. He had taken on Tudor's role without Tudor's experience and expertise. But he was a very capable businessman, and the circus continued for a number of years under a variety of names: the Circus of Varieties, the Hippodrome, the New Grand Circus, the Empire Circus, the Empire Music Hall, and finally the Gaiety Theatre. Now, Askham was much keener on variety artists like comedians and singers, and this illustration of the circus on the 21st of July 1900 shows performers who are much more likely to be found in the music hall, with Gibson, the Australian axe juggler, the only frills and spills act. The serios, who were ladies who sang both serious and comic songs and danced, showing their legs, were particularly in Askham's favour, such as the Sisters Holman here from August 1890. The tumbling clowns were replaced by comedians such as Denby and Dent, bottom right, and acts that required specialist equipment like tight ropes and high wire acts were no longer recruited. Now, this brochure came from an uncatalogued collection of ephemera in Cambridge University Library. And in it, you can see the building has briefly become the new Grand Circus managed by George King. And the performers listed on the inside include music hall star George Formby, who was the father of the more famous actor and singer of the same name. In 1902, 1903 and 1906, Askham applied unsuccessfully for a license to stage plays. And there was much controversy generated by the local clergy who were very much against these unlicensed performances and their indecent nature. And in fact, in 1908, he was fined for this, but in 1909, the license application succeeded. So its last incarnation as an entertainment venue was the Gaiety Theatre, a music hall that only ran from 1913 to 1914. And this handbill is also from this box of uncatalogued ephemera in the University Library. The building closed as an entertainment venue at the beginning of the First World War. We know that the circus fixtures and fittings were put up for sale in November 1917, and that it had various uses subsequently as the Great Eastern Railway Company garage, as a warehouse. It had a brief renaissance in the 1980s as the Midsummer Glassworks art studio before it was demolished in the 1990s when it was replaced by Auckland Court. And some of you here may remember it before then and may even have photographs of it. So if you have any information that's not already on our website, please do contact us. So there are our contact details and lots more to read about the various circus performers. But I'm afraid that's all for tonight's show and the end of our brief glimpse into Tudor's Cambridge Circus. The band now plays its finale, the circus lights are dimmed, and the likes of Pongo, the man monkey, Rivali, the fire king, Mr. Twistello, the boneless wonder, Nimble Nip the clown, and Nala Damant Jani, the Hindu princess with her pythons, disappear into the dark and are seen in Cambridge no more. Thank you.
That's so wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautifully done. You are really a doubler. You are.
We were sorry we couldn't come in costume, and we're sorry we couldn't juggle.
Carol and I have actually performed when you said about we could rerun something of the Funny Fred. She made me be the front end of the donkey, and she was back.
I was going to talk about that. Because Funny Fred had a troop of donkeys.
He did.
And we honoured him at the late lamented Victorian parlour evenings that the Mill Road History Society used to have. And yes, we had one baby donkey, and then Mary was the front legs and I was the rear legs.
And have you a picture of it?
Not at all a good one.
Yes, there is. I was very upset about having to go into a donkey head that was hired from the Cambridge wardrobe, and it's like some poor child with a cold that probably had it.
So we are happy to take questions, of course.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know if I misunderstood, but you mentioned Sabina as a wife of William.
Frederick Jones.
So she became a wife of Fred, or there's
No,
two Sabinas?
so this is a question about Sabina Jones. I think there's a bit of confusion. Sabina Jones was the wife of Frederick Jones, who was the tripe dresser, who lived in Cockburn Street, locally here, and who went to the circus in 1893. So, and
This is one Sabina then?
yes, that's right. So the other women mentioned were, only Fred's wife, Julia. William had 3 wives. He'd lived a long time with his 3rd wife in Blythe. So does that answer your question?
Sort of kind. I'm just interested about all of these wives.
Yeah. Read the website.
What happened to the discards?
Mr. Cooper.
Your find in the uncatalogued box at Cambridge University Library was tremendous, but how did you know it was there?
Do you want to talk about that?
Okay, I knew somebody. I knew somebody who was the retired rare books librarian, and he said to me there is this collection of ephemera in the rare books library given by Ansell, who was an academic, and it's about 15 boxes of mostly university stuff, but there were 5 boxes of town stuff, and it's programs, it's fates, it's dances, it's all sorts of stuff he collected, and it's just completely unsorted. And on the top of one, there's a note saying, put in chronological order, but nobody has. So I just looked through the relevant boxes, and I found those 3 items. It was very exciting, but I had to be restrained because I was in the rare books library.
Sorry, I intended to repeat each question for the recording. So that was about the box of ephemera in the university library. Yes?
How common was it at the time to have a permanent building?
Oh, well, that is a good question. This is about how common was it to have permanent circus buildings. It was very common. One of our general histories of circus, it's Spate, isn't it, says that really in the first half of the 19th century, fixed buildings were far more common than travelling circuses. So tented circuses were introduced in 1842 by an American whose name I can't remember. But at this time, there would have been travelling tented circuses, there would have been fixed buildings. The wooden buildings were simply put up for 3-month seasons. They hired a bit of the common, paid the borough council for it, and in fact Thoday built those as well, certainly for Charlie Keith. And they'd be taken down and the materials put up for sale at the end of the season. Charlie Keith claimed to have built about 50 or 60 circuses in his long career around the country. So that, as I said, that is a good question. There's only 2 fixed circuses left. One's in Great Yarmouth, which is well worth going to, and the other one is at Blackpool Tower.
So that's amazing. I have no idea that there were permanent buildings. And they must have raked in the money in order for it to be economical to...
Well, I think...
A big building like that.
Well, the wooden circuses would have been built cheaply, I suppose, and some of the money recouped. Tudor actually moved a wooden circus between 2 towns in northeast England at one point. So they could recoup the cost. I have no idea. We've got no information about the economics of it all, but yes, on the face of it. But at the same time, the huge travelling circuses were coming. On our website, in our 1898 section, there is an account of Barnum and Bailey, greatest show on earth, coming to the Common. And that is astounding for the speed in which it was set up and knocked down, and for the sheer scale of the thing as well. They came for one day, arrived in the early hours of the morning, set up, performed twice, and went to Peterborough that night. So that's... they arrived at Cambridge Station in 4 trains. So that's completely different. Whether Tudor had anybody in his circus that night or not, we don't know, but it was in the middle of his season.
They had their own trained regime of,
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
I've heard of elephants and...
Sorry?
Elephants being paraded through Cambridge. Would that be the travelling circuses?
That, well, if you're, that happened as recently as the 1970s. Do you want to talk about that?
I'll talk about that because Tudor only had 4 lots of wild animals in his circuses in the years he was here, and we get the impression he was not keen on it because there's a scene where the clowns dress up as lions. One of them is a lion tamer, and he whips all the clowns. The clowns get the whip back, and then they whip the lion tamer. So he did have elephants once. He had 3 elephants that were done by a man called Lockhart. And the moral... Lockhart was finally killed by one of his elephants when he was unloading it off a train, and it crushed him. We've put a bit on wild animals in circuses on the website because I know it is quite an interesting topic. But really, it was the big American circuses that travelled with menageries, as well as the circus, and they had, Barnum and Bailey had 2 separate rings, and a menagerie, and a freak show. Our circuses didn't really go in for that at all. So Tudor had dogs, ponies, pigeons. He had a goat.
Fred's donkeys.
Fred's donkeys, but really there were only 4 wild animal acts in his whole time, so he really didn't go in for that, and he certainly didn't parade around. Does that answer?
Yes, thank you.
But have you found a photograph of the elephant? Because I believe there is one of somebody, an elephant walking down the road.
Yes. We've
Down Mill Road. I saw it going, and there's a picture of me looking at the elephant, but you can't see the elephant. My dad just took a picture of me and my sister waving on Jesus Lane, I think. You know,
There's no photographs from the 1890s that we've come across, but on the Cambridge News website there are archive photographs of them parading from the station down Hills Road. So that would have been Billy Smart's or Bertram Mills.
I think it was Billy Smart's,
Yeah,
the one that I've seen.
probably. Well, I can remember them when I was growing up in Wembley. They arrived at the railway station. There's a little railway station near the old stadium. They would arrive there and parade all down the high road to the park where the circus is set up.
And it's interesting that back at Tudor's time, there was already a movement against having wild animals in circuses. And I think Cambridge was one of the first authorities to ban wild animals in circuses. But did you know you can keep a wild animal at home? You can't have it in a circus, but you can keep, lynxes, lions and tigers at home.
Outside leafleting at the last circus that had animals in. There's a question here.
Yeah, just thinking about kind of the opposite of this, the Barnum and Bailey's all singing, all dancing. So you were saying they would do a season. The impression I got was that was for several weeks at a time, every night. And you just wonder about who went.
Yes, good question. Well, Frederick Jones. So this is a question about how long the Cambridge seasons were and who went. Do you want to do that?
They lasted between 2 and 4 months. I think they often were not allowed to perform during the university term, were they? Right. The university was dead against anything like that. And although they had the stock company people would perform different acts each week, but every week they would have new acts who would come for maybe 1 week or 2. So you could go every single week and see something new.
And really, the only firm information we have about the audiences is what we told you about Frederick Jones and the other named people, simply because they were named as prize winners in the newspaper that week. But, I mean, we went to this society's conference day in April, which was called Working Lives in East Cambridge and Barnwell, is that right? And that was partly to get a feeling of what life was like in East Cambridge at that time. What we really need to do is for somebody to put their hands up and say, I'd love to do some research into who the local people were and who was...
That's what we're always after.
Sorry, one little bit of information which we briefly displayed was that the prices in whatever year that was, the year of Mr. Jones, 1893, it was 2 shillings for the most expensive seats, 1 shilling and 6pence, and there were sometimes cheaper prices, especially for children. So I put 2 shillings, or 10pence, as we call it now, into the Bank of England inflation calculator, and that came out as £11. So I mean, that I don't think that's very reliable. I mean,
Just imagine they probably did what they've done for the last few years in Cambridge. They would put things out and then you could get 1 ticket and 2...
oh, maybe, yeah. I'm not sure about that,
They used to
actually.
bring them around the schools and
Yes,
say,
yeah.
take this home and you can get...
I think I get one forms the impression, you know, we have this quotation that you read that said there was a bumper house or a bumping house. So yeah, a full house.
Which we've got tonight, pretty much.
Absolutely, yes, you're bumping, all of you. Well, you raised the roof nicely.
Do you know how many it took? Do you know how many was in a full house?
1,400 people were the size of the audience.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. It's slightly frightening, isn't it? So that was a question about the capacity.
Yes, Mr. Catchpole of Sydney Street guessed correctly at 1,400, and that's when he won his box of cigars, I think he won.
And what was the population of Cambridge at that time?
About 50,000.
Lady at the back.
May I ask, with these 3 marriages of William,
Right.
have you become aware or had contact from any of his progeny?
Okay. This is a question about William Tudor's 3 marriages and have we been in contact with any of his family? So I'll just run through the 3 marriages. He married a young woman called Alice, whose pre-marriage name I can't remember, but her father was a clown, and she was another equestrian, and they were working for Stoodley and Harmston when she took a fall from her horse, and she had a miscarriage, and she died from an infection, as so many women died in or after pregnancy in those days. She was 19 or 20. They'd already had 1 child, who actually William put up for adoption. And he's to be found, that young boy is to be found in the census. Now I know that because some of the previous research into Tudor's circus was by a gentleman from Littleport who wrote an article a long time ago, 40 years ago, and this is Roger Rudderham. Mary has a copy of the article in the local history library. That really helped us. And then Chris Jakes, Mary's former colleague, actually put us in touch with him. And I corresponded with Roger Rudderham, and he told me about this lost child, the one that survived but was adopted. There was a second wife called Ellen Tudor, who crops up with William in the censuses in 1891. I found no trace of her in any of the official records. Censuses couldn't find a marriage certificate or birth or death certificates. And then his third wife, Edith Butler, was 30 years younger than him. She was a performer that he must have met around the turn of the century, and they got married in 1908, and she survived him when he died in 1940. And there were definitely children from that marriage. There was a girl called Alar. I don't think she flew through the air. She was spelled A-double-A, and a boy called Valentine. And have we been in touch with anybody? Yes, I've been posting messages on a Blythe local history Facebook group, and some people have responded, and there is a woman there who said I'm his great-great-granddaughter, and she's posted up some pictures on that group as well. And sorry, just to mention that Blythe connection again, somebody else there was really interested, and she agreed to go and take a photograph of William and Edith's grave for me. Sadly, nowhere near as nice as Fred's. There's no marker. She sent me a photograph of a piece of grass, which is a real shame. Yeah, he deserves more.
Certainly did.
Yeah.
Sorry, coming on to wives. How many wives did Mr. Matthews have with his 21 children?
Oh, well,
Just the one.
yeah, yeah, I
Just the
think
one.
so.
She worked very hard,
Yeah.
didn't she?
Yeah, yeah.
That amazing story about we with the baby. We were on the tightrope.
I'm sure the authorities would have something to say. Look, my arm's going to fall off it. Because there's two of you. You get flowers as well as the...
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.